A secret playlist revealed on a speeding train unlocks hidden memories between two souls bound by love, loss, and a haunting past. Don't play it, Jimin said, his voice barely steady as the train lurched forward, slicing through the neon-lit veins of the city at a speed that made the world outside blur into streaks of light. But Jungkook had already pressed play. The first note slipped into the air like a ghost. It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. The sound alone was enough to tighten something invisible between them, something that had been stretched thin for years and was now threatening to snap. Jimin stared at the phone in Jungkook's hand as if it were a weapon. "You promised," he whispered. Jungkook didn't look at him. His gaze stayed fixed on the reflection in the train window where their faces overlapped with the rushing cityscape, two versions of themselves layered over a life that refused to slow down. "I promised I wouldn't forget," Jungkook said quietly. "I never promised I wouldn't remember." The train roared into a tunnel, and for a moment everything went dark. When the lights flickered back, the song had already sunk into Jimin's chest. It was the kind of melody that didn't just play, it lingered like the echo of laughter in an empty room. Soft piano, a distant hum of strings, and beneath it something raw, something unfinished. Jimin swallowed hard. "You still have this." Jungkook gave a faint, almost humorless smile. "You think I'd delete it?" Jimin didn't answer. He leaned back against the seat, but his body remained tense like he was bracing for impact. Outside, the city exploded back into view: billboards, traffic, the glow of late-night diners. Inside, the air felt heavier, thick with everything neither of them had said in years. The playlist had a name. Jimin knew it without looking. He remembered the night they made it, not because it was special in the way people usually meant, but because it wasn't supposed to matter. And yet it did. "Why now?" Jimin asked, his voice quieter this time. Jungkook finally turned to him. His eyes were darker than Jimin remembered, or maybe Jimin had just forgotten how much they held. "Because we're running out of time." The words hit harder than the music. Jimin frowned. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, Jungkook tapped the screen again. The song shifted. A different track, but the same effect, like opening a door that should have stayed closed. This one was louder, messier, guitar strings that trembled with something dangerously close to anger. Jimin let out a sharp breath. "Turn it off." "You remember this one," Jungkook said, ignoring him. "I said turn it off." "You were wearing that stupid oversized hoodie," Jungkook continued, his voice gaining an edge. "The one you said made you look mysterious." Jimin shut his eyes. The memory came anyway. Rain against glass, a cramped apartment, the smell of instant noodles and something burning because Jungkook had forgotten to turn off the stove again. And the fight. God, the fight. "You always do this," Jimin muttered, opening his eyes again. "You bring things back like they didn't break us." "They didn't break us," Jungkook said immediately. "They did." The train jolted as it took a sharp curve, the force pushing them slightly toward each other before they both instinctively pulled back. Silence fell between them, but it wasn't empty. It was crowded with everything they had avoided. Jungkook's fingers hovered over the phone screen, but he didn't stop the music. "You left," he said finally. Jimin let out a dry laugh. "That's what you remember." "That's what happened." Jimin shook his head, his hands curling into fists in his lap. "No, that's what you tell yourself so you don't have to think about why." Jungkook's jaw tightened. For a moment he looked like he might argue. But then he just said, "So tell me." The challenge hung in the air. Jimin hesitated. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud would make it real again. The song kept playing. It filled the space between them, pressing against the silence until Jimin couldn't ignore it anymore. "You never stayed," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook blinked. "What?" "You were always there," Jimin clarified, his voice trembling slightly, "but you never stayed, not really." Jungkook frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "It does to me." Another tunnel swallowed them whole. Darkness again. This time neither of them spoke. The music seemed louder in the absence of light, every note sharper, more intrusive. Jimin stared at his own reflection in the window, but all he could see was the past layered over it. "You remember the third song?" Jungkook asked suddenly. Jimin's heart skipped. I don't want to. Jungkook didn't listen. He played it. The shift was immediate. This one was softer than the others, almost fragile, a melody that felt like it could shatter if you breathed too hard. Jimin's throat tightened. No, he said, shaking his head, not this one. But it was already too late. The memory hit him like a wave. A rooftop. Cold air biting at their skin. The city spread out below them, endless and alive. Jungkook laughing about something Jimin couldn't even remember now. And then, the silence that followed. Jimin inhaled sharply, his chest rising and falling too fast. You said you'd stay, he whispered. Jungkook's expression changed. Something flickered across his face, regret maybe, or guilt. I wanted to, he said. That's not the same thing. Jungkook looked down at the phone. At the playlist. At the past he had carefully preserved, track by track, memory by memory. You think I don't know that? He asked quietly. Jimin didn't answer. The train began to slow, the subtle shift in motion barely noticeable but enough to signal that something was changing. A stop was coming. Jimin glanced at the doors, then back at Jungkook. Is this why you called me? He asked. To what? Relive everything. Jungkook shook his head. No. Then what? For a moment Jungkook didn't speak. Then he locked the phone screen, cutting the music off mid-note. The silence that followed was louder than any song. I needed to know, Jungkook said slowly, if it still meant something to you. Jimin stared at him. The question felt unfair. Cruel even. Because the answer had never changed. It never stopped meaning something, Jimin said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jungkook exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for years. The train came to a complete stop. The door slid open with a soft hiss. People began to move, stepping off, stepping on, their lives continuing without pause. But neither of them moved. Jungkook looked at Jimin, really looked this time, not at the version he remembered but the one sitting in front of him now. Then stay, he said. Jimin's heart pounded. The word echoed in his chest, colliding with every doubt, every fear, every memory that had led them here. He glanced at the open doors. At the city waiting outside. At the past sitting beside him. Then back at Jungkook. For a long moment he said nothing. And in that silence, everything they had been and everything they could still become hung suspended between them. The doors began to close. Wait, Jimin's voice cut through the mechanical chime, sharp and instinctive, his hand shooting out as if he could physically stop time itself. Jungkook didn't move. He just watched him. That was the problem, it had always been the problem. Jungkook watched, absorbed, felt, but when it came to choosing, to acting, to staying, he hesitated just long enough for everything to fall apart. The door sealed shut with a final, unforgiving click. The train lurched forward again. Jimin let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was nothing humorous about it. Great, now I'm stuck. You could have left, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin turned to him, eyes flashing. You really think it's that simple? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. His silence stretched, heavy and deliberate, like he was weighing every possible response and discarding them all. It was simple for you before, he said finally. The words landed like a slap. Jimin leaned back, staring at him in disbelief. You don't get to say that. I just did. No, Jimin shot back, his voice rising despite himself, drawing a few glances from other passengers. You don't get to rewrite it like that, like I just walked away because I felt like it. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Then tell me what it was, Jimin, because from where I stood you were gone the second things got hard. Jimin laughed again, louder this time, and it cracked in the middle. Hard, you think that was just hard? The train rattled over the tracks, the sound filling the space between them like static. Jungkook leaned forward slightly. His voice lower now but more intense. You never gave me a chance to fix it. You never even saw it was broken, Jimin snapped. That did it. Something shifted in Jungkook's expression, not anger, not exactly, something deeper, something rawer. I saw enough to know you didn't trust me, he said. Jimin froze. The words hit somewhere precise, painfully precise. Trust, Jimin repeated, softer now, almost incredulous. You want to talk about trust? Jungkook didn't look away. Yeah, I do. Jimin shook his head slowly, like he couldn't believe they were standing on this ground again after everything. Do you remember that night? Jimin asked, his voice suddenly quieter but far more dangerous. Or did you just keep the songs and forget everything else? Jungkook's fingers twitched against his knee. Which night? Jimin let out a hollow breath. Of course. The train sped past a cluster of buildings, their lights flickering across Jungkook's face like fragmented memories. The rooftop, Jimin said, the one you just played. Jungkook's gaze flickered just for a second. I remember, he said. Do you? Jimin leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Because I don't think you do, not the part that mattered. Jungkook swallowed, but he didn't interrupt. Jimin's hands were trembling now, though he kept them clenched, like he was holding something fragile together by sheer force. You asked me to stay, Jimin said, just like now, same words, same look. Jungkook's chest tightened. And I said yes, Jimin continued, his voice breaking slightly. I said yes, even though I knew it would ruin me. Jungkook's eyes widened just a fraction. Ruin you. You think I didn't see it? Jimin laughed bitterly. The way you were already halfway out the door even when you were standing right in front of me. That's not true. It is, Jimin's voice rose again, sharp enough to cut through the noise of the train. You never chose me completely, not once. Silence slammed into them. Jungkook stared at him, something like shock written all over his face. That's what you think, he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. That's what I know. Jungkook leaned back slowly, running a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven now. Wow, he muttered under his breath, that's what all of this is. Jimin frowned, what does that mean? It means you made a decision about me, Jungkook said, looking back at him, his eyes sharper now. And you never gave me the chance to prove you wrong. Jimin stared at him stunned. I waited. For how long? Jungkook shot back immediately. Because from my side it felt like you were counting down the seconds until you could leave. That's not fair. Neither is this, Jungkook gestured between them, his voice finally breaking through his usual restraint. You think I didn't care, you think I didn't want to stay. Wanting isn't enough? Jimin's voice cracked, louder than before, and this time people definitely turned to look. You either do it or you don't, Jungkook. The words echoed. Even after Jimin said them, they seemed to linger, hanging in the air like something irreversible. Jungkook went very still. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, he said. Jimin blinked, okay. Okay, Jungkook repeated, his voice calmer now, but there was something unsettling about that calm. Then let's stop pretending this is just about the past. Jimin's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Jungkook reached into his pocket and pulled his phone out again. Jimin tensed immediately. Don't. But Jungkook was already unlocking it. There's one more song, he said. Jimin shook his head. No, we're not doing this again. This one's new. That made Jimin pause. What? Jungkook looked at him, and for the first time since this started, there was something undeniably vulnerable in his expression. I added it yesterday. Jimin's heart started pounding again, slower this time, heavier. Why? He asked. Jungkook hesitated. Then he pressed play. The sound that filled the air wasn't nostalgic. It wasn't tied to some shared past or hidden memory. It was unfamiliar. Unfinished. A simple melody, almost hesitant, like it wasn't sure it deserved to exist yet. Jimin frowned, confusion replacing some of the anger in his chest. What is this? Jungkook didn't answer right away. He watched Jimin instead, like he was waiting for something. I wrote it, he said finally. Jimin's breath caught. You what? Jungkook gave a small, almost self-conscious shrug. It's not done. Jimin stared at him, his mind struggling to catch up. You don't write songs. I didn't, Jungkook corrected softly, before. The train began to slow again, another station approaching, but this time neither of them looked at the doors. Jimin's voice came out quieter now. What is it about? Jungkook met his eyes. You. The word landed harder than any accusation, any argument, any memory they had just torn open. Jimin felt it in his chest, in his throat, in the way his hands suddenly didn't know what to do. That's not funny, he said, but there was no humor in his voice. I'm not joking. The melody continued, filling the silence between them with something fragile and terrifyingly honest. Jimin shook his head slightly. Why now? Jungkook inhaled slowly. Because I didn't stay before, he said. You're right. Jimin's heart twisted. And I can't change that, Jungkook continued. But this, he gestured to the phone, to the music, to whatever this moment was, this is me choosing now. Jimin's eyes burned. You think that fixes everything, he asked. No, Jungkook said immediately. I think it's the first honest thing I've done in a long time. The train came to another stop. The doors opened again. This time the world outside didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a choice. Jimin looked at the open doors. Then back at Jungkook. The music played on, unfinished, unresolved. Just like them. And for the first time, Jimin realized that maybe the scariest part wasn't what had already broken between them, but what might still be possible if they tried to put it back together. The doors stayed open longer than usual, as if the train itself was hesitating, waiting for a decision neither of them seemed ready to make. Say something, Jungkook murmured, his voice quieter now but somehow heavier than before. Jimin didn't move. His eyes were locked on the open doorway where people stepped in and out without a second thought, their lives untouched by the weight pressing down inside this single train car. You're asking me to stay again, Jimin said finally, his tone dangerously calm. Do you even hear yourself? I do. And you think one song changes everything? I think it changes me. Jimin let out a slow breath, turning his head just enough to look at him. That's convenient. Jungkook flinched, barely noticeable, but Jimin caught it. Say it, Jungkook said. Whatever you're holding back, just say it. Jimin's lips parted, then pressed together again. His fingers tapped restlessly against his knee, a habit Jungkook remembered too well, something he only did when he was trying not to explode. You want honesty? Jimin asked. Yes. Fine, Jimin leaned forward, his voice dropping, sharp and cutting. I don't trust you. The words landed clean. No hesitation, no softness to cushion the blow. Jungkook didn't look away. Why? He asked almost immediately. Jimin blinked like he hadn't expected that question. Are you serious? Yeah, Jungkook said, his voice steady. I am. Jimin let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Because you left me standing on that rooftop like I didn't matter. I didn't leave you, Jungkook shot back, his voice rising again. I went downstairs for 10 minutes. You didn't come back? Jimin cut him off, louder this time, drawing stairs again, but neither of them cared anymore. I did, Jungkook insisted. No, you did. I did, Jimin. Jungkook leaned closer, his voice shaking now, not with anger but something dangerously close to desperation. You were gone when I came back. Jimin froze. The world seemed to tilt for a second, the noise of the train fading into something distant and hollow. What? Jimin whispered. Jungkook's breathing was uneven. You weren't there. Jimin shook his head slowly, confusion replacing the anger on his face. That's not true. It is. I waited for you. I came back. The words collided, messy and unresolved, like two versions of the same memory refusing to align. Jimin stood up abruptly, the sudden movement making the overhead handles sway. No, he said, packing a step away before turning back. No, that's not how it happened. Jungkook stayed seated but his eyes followed every movement. Then tell me. I stayed, Jimin said, his voice unsteady now. Not from anger but from something deeper, something cracking open. I stayed until it got cold, until the lights started turning off in the buildings around us. I stayed until I realized you weren't coming back. Jungkook shook his head immediately. I ran back upstairs. You didn't. I did. Then where were you? Jimin demanded, stepping closer again, his chest rising and falling too fast. Because I was there, Jungkook, I was there alone. Jungkook's hands curled into fists. I don't know what to tell you, I remember running up those stairs like my life depended on it, and when I got there, his voice faltered, you were gone. Silence fell between them again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just heavy. It was wrong. Jimin stared at him, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. Any crack that would reveal this was just another excuse, another way to twist the past into something easier to live with. But there was nothing. Jungkook looked just as shaken. Just as certain. That doesn't make sense, Jimin said, quieter now. I know. Someone's lying. I'm not, Jungkook said immediately. Neither am I. The tension snapped again, but underneath it something else was forming. Doubt. Not about each other. About the memory itself. The train started moving again, pulling away from the station, but neither of them noticed this time. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts racing. What time did you come back? Jungkook frowned. I don't know, late. That's not an answer. I didn't check the time, Jimin. Well, I did, Jimin shot back, because I kept looking at my phone, waiting for a message, a call, anything. Jungkook's expression shifted slightly. I called you. Jimin's breath hitched. No, you didn't. I did, Jungkook insisted, twice. Jimin stared at him, his heart starting to pound again, but this time for a completely different reason. I didn't get anything. Jungkook reached for his phone again, his movements quicker now, almost frantic. I still have the logs. Jimin didn't stop him this time. He watched as Jungkook scrolled, his fingers trembling just slightly. There, Jungkook said, turning the screen toward him, that night. Jimin stepped closer, his eyes scanning the screen. 2 missed calls. His name. The timestamp. Jimin's stomach dropped. That's, his voice trailed off, that's not possible. I told you, Jungkook said, his voice quieter now but no less intense. I didn't just disappear. Jimin shook his head, stepping back again, his mind struggling to process it. I didn't get those. How could you not? I don't know, Jimin snapped, frustration bleeding back in. Maybe my phone died, maybe there was no signal, maybe. He stopped. Something clicked. A memory. Small, insignificant at the time. But now. My phone, Jimin said slowly. Jungkook frowned. What about it? It died, Jimin continued, his voice distant now, like he was piecing something together in real time. Right before you left. Jungkook blinked. So you didn't see the calls? No, Jimin whispered. The realization settled between them, quiet but massive. Years of anger. Years of blame. Built on something as simple and devastating as a dead phone. Jungkook let out a breath, leaning back in his seat, his hand covering his mouth for a second. You thought I left you. Jimin laughed weakly, running a hand over his face. And you thought I walked away. They both fell silent. The weight of it all pressing down in a completely different way now. Not sharp. Not explosive. Just heavy. That's it, Jimin said after a moment, his voice almost hollow. That's what broke us. Jungkook didn't answer right away. Because how do you respond to something like that? How do you accept that something so small could unravel something that once felt unbreakable? I came back, Jungkook said finally, his voice rough, and you weren't there. I stayed, Jimin replied just as quietly, and you never showed up. The tragedy of it settled in fully now. Not betrayal. Not abandonment. Just missing each other. Jimin let out a long breath, his shoulders slumping slightly for the first time since this started. That's insane, he muttered. Jungkook let out a humorless chuckle. Yeah. Another silence. But this one wasn't filled with anger. It was filled with something far more complicated. Regret. Jimin glanced at him again, his gaze softer now but still uncertain. So what now? Jungkook looked at him, really looked at him, like he was trying to memorize every detail all over again. Now, Jungkook said slowly, we decide if we're going to let that be the end of it. Jimin's heart tightened. Or, he asked. Jungkook hesitated. Then quietly. Or we start over. The words hung in the air, fragile and terrifying. Jimin looked away, back at the window, where the city kept rushing past like nothing had changed. But everything had. You make it sound easy, Jimin said. It's not. Jimin nodded slightly. No, it's not. The train continued forward, steady and relentless. And for the first time since they sat down across from each other, the past didn't feel like something closing in on them. But something they might finally understand. The train lights flickered once, then steadied, casting a pale glow over their faces as if nothing monumental had just unraveled between them. Jimin let out a slow breath, but it wasn't relief. It was something heavier, like realizing the wound had never been what he thought it was and now he didn't know where the pain actually came from. "So that's it," he said, his voice low but sharp again. "A dead phone, 2 missed calls, and suddenly everything we went through just dissolves." Jungkook frowned slightly. "I didn't say that." "That's what it sounds like." "It explains it," Jungkook corrected, his tone firm. "It doesn't erase it." Jimin scoffed, turning away for a second before looking back again, his eyes burning with something unresolved. "You really think the problem was just that night?" Jungkook hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Jimin let out a hollow laugh. "Yeah, that's what I thought." "What do you want me to say?" Jungkook asked, his voice tightening. "That everything was perfect until that moment. It was, we both know that." "Then say it," Jimin challenged. "Say what actually broke us." Jungkook's jaw clenched. "You want the truth. I've been asking for it this whole time." "Fine." Jungkook leaned forward, his eyes locked onto Jimin with a sudden intensity that made Jimin's breath hitch. "You pushed me away long before that night." Jimin blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me. You heard me." "No, I don't think I did," Jimin shot back, his voice rising again, "because that doesn't make any sense." "It makes perfect sense," Jungkook said, his voice steadier now, like he had been holding this in for years. "You kept building walls, Jimin. Every time things got real, every time I tried to get closer, you, what, pulled back, made a joke, changed the subject, anything to avoid actually letting me in." Jimin stared at him, disbelief flashing across his face. "That's not fair." "It's true." "You think I didn't let you in?" Jimin stepped closer again, his voice trembling, not weak but furious. "I gave you everything." "No," Jungkook said quietly, "you gave me parts." The words hit harder than anything else so far. Jimin froze. Jungkook didn't look away. "You gave me the easy parts," he continued. "The fun, the laughter, the late nights where nothing mattered, but the moment things got complicated, really complicated, you shut me out." Jimin's chest tightened. "That's not." "You never told me what you were afraid of," Jungkook pressed, his voice gaining edge again. "You never told me why you looked at me like you were already bracing for the end." Jimin shook his head, his thoughts spinning. "Because I knew you." Jungkook's expression darkened. "You knew me." "I knew you wouldn't stay," Jimin said, his voice cracking now, the raw truth spilling out whether he wanted it to or not. "I saw it every time you hesitated, every time you pulled away just enough for me to notice." Jungkook laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So instead of talking to me, you just decided that for both of us." "I wasn't wrong." "You were," Jungkook snapped, louder than before, his restraint finally shattering. "I was scared, Jimin. That's not the same as leaving." Jimin's breath caught. The word hung there. "Scared." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jimin's voice came out softer but no less intense. "Of what?" Jungkook hesitated again. But this time, it wasn't the same kind of hesitation. This one felt deeper. More dangerous. "Of you," he said finally. Jimin blinked, completely thrown. "What?" "You," Jungkook repeated, his voice quieter now but steady. "Of how much you mattered, of how much I." He stopped himself, his jaw tightening. Jimin took a step closer, his heart pounding. "How much you what?" Jungkook looked away for the first time, his hand gripping the edge of the seat like he needed something solid to hold onto. "Say it," Jimin pushed, his voice barely above a whisper now but filled with urgency. "You don't get to stop now." Jungkook let out a shaky breath. Then finally, "How much I loved you." The world seemed to still. The noise of the train, the hum of the tracks, the distant chatter of other passengers, it all faded into something distant and irrelevant. Jimin's chest tightened so sharply it almost hurt. "You don't get to say that now," he said, his voice unsteady. "Why not?" "Because you never said it then." Jungkook flinched. "I tried." "No, you didn't," Jimin shot back. "You danced around it, you hinted, you God, Jungkook, you never actually said it." "I thought you knew." "That's not the same thing," Jimin's voice cracked, louder now, drawing even more attention, but he didn't care. "You don't just assume something like that and expect it to be enough." Jungkook stood up now, matching Jimin's height, the space between them shrinking until the tension felt almost physical. "I was terrified," Jungkook said, his voice low but intense. Because the second I said it out loud, it would have been real, and if it was real, then losing you would have destroyed you, Jimin finished, his eyes searching Jungkook's face. Jungkook nodded once. Jimin swallowed hard. You think it didn't destroy me anyway? That hit hard. Jungkook's expression faltered, the anger cracking just enough for something else to seep through. I thought you left, he said quietly. And I thought you didn't come back, Jimin replied just as softly. They stood there, inches apart, both breathing unevenly, both carrying years of misunderstanding that suddenly felt too big to process all at once. The train slowed again, another station approaching, but this time it felt different. Heavier. Like something inevitable was coming. Jimin let out a shaky breath, his voice quieter now but no less raw. Do you know what the worst part is? Jungkook shook his head slightly. Jimin laughed weakly. Even after everything, I still. He stopped. Jungkook's eyes locked onto his. You still what? Jimin looked away, running a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with the words. Say it, Jungkook urged, softer now. Jimin closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again, meeting Jungkook's gaze with something painfully honest. I still would have stayed, he admitted. Jungkook's breath caught. If you had just come back 5 minutes earlier, if my phone hadn't died, if we had just… Jimin shook his head, his voice breaking. I would have stayed. The weight of that truth settled between them, thick and suffocating. Jungkook stepped closer without thinking, his voice barely above a whisper. You can still stay. Jimin let out a soft, almost broken laugh. You don't get it. Then make me understand. Jimin hesitated. Then he said the one thing Jungkook wasn't prepared for. I'm not alone anymore. The words hit like a sudden drop. Jungkook froze. What? Jimin swallowed, his gaze steady now, even though his hands trembled slightly at his sides. I moved on. The train came to a complete stop. The doors opened. But this time neither of them looked. Jungkook's voice came out quieter than anything he'd said so far. You're with someone. Jimin didn't answer immediately. That silence was enough. Jungkook let out a breath, stepping back slightly, like the space between them had suddenly become necessary. Wow, he muttered, more to himself than to Jimin. Jimin's chest tightened at the reaction. It's not like that. It sounds exactly like that. It's complicated. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. Of course it is. Jimin frowned. Don't do that. Do what? Act like this is simple. Jungkook looked at him again, something guarded settling over his expression. You just told me you moved on. What exactly am I supposed to do with that? Jimin didn't have an answer. Because there wasn't a clean one. The music from earlier still lingered in the air, even though it had stopped playing. Unfinished. Just like everything between them. Jungkook glanced at the open doors, then back at Jimin. For the first time, there was hesitation in his stance. Not fear. Not confusion. Something quieter. Something more dangerous. Resignation. Then I guess I'm too late, Jungkook said. Jimin's heart twisted painfully. Jungkook. But Jungkook shook his head, a faint, tired smile pulling at his lips. It's okay, he said, even though it clearly was. At least now I know. The doors began to close again. And this time, the distance between them felt wider than ever. The doors slid shut with a final, muted thud, sealing the moment in place like something irreversible. Jungkook didn't sit back down. He stayed standing, one hand gripping the overhead rail, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond Jimin, like if he looked directly at him again, something inside him might break for good. Jimin hated that. Say something, Jimin said, his voice tight. Jungkook let out a slow breath, his grip tightening slightly. What do you want me to say? I don't know, anything that is this. Jimin gestured vaguely between them, frustration creeping back in. You don't just get quiet and disappear again. Jungkook let out a hollow chuckle. Disappear, I'm literally standing right here. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Silence stretched again, but it wasn't the same as before. This one felt sharper, edged with something unresolved. Who is it? Jungkook asked suddenly. Jimin blinked. What? The person you're with, Jungkook clarified, his tone deceptively calm. Who are they? Jimin hesitated. Why does it matter? Jungkook finally looked at him again, and there it was, that intensity, raw and unfiltered. It matters to me. That's not fair. Neither is hearing you moved on in the middle of. Jungkook cut himself off, exhaling sharply. Just answer the question. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable now. It's not serious. Jungkook's eyes narrowed slightly. That's not what I asked. I know. Then answer me. Jimin hesitated longer this time. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. Jungkook's expression shifted, something darker settling beneath the surface. You don't want to say their name. That's not it. Then what is it? Jimin looked away, his jaw tightening. Because if I say it, this becomes real in a way I'm not ready for. Jungkook let out a quiet, bitter laugh. It's already real, Jimin. I know. Then stop acting like you can still pretend otherwise. Jimin's chest rose and fell sharply. You think this is easy for me? No, Jungkook said immediately. I think you're making it harder than it needs to be. That snapped something. Harder, Jimin repeated, his voice rising again. You show up after all this time, pull me into this emotional mess, and suddenly I'm the one making things complicated. I didn't pull you into anything, Jungkook shot back. You stayed. Jimin laughed bitterly. You asked me to. And you could have said no. I tried. Jimin stepped closer, his voice breaking through the tension like a crack in glass. You don't get it, Jungkook. I tried to walk away the second I saw you, but I could. The words hung there, raw and exposed. Jungkook's breath caught. Why? He asked, quieter now. Jimin swallowed hard, his gaze flickering for just a second before locking back onto Jungkook. You really have to ask? I need to hear you say it. Jimin clenched his fists, his entire body tense like he was holding himself together by force. Because you don't just disappear from someone's life like that and expect it to mean nothing when you come back. That's not an answer. It is. It's not enough. The tension between them snapped tighter, pulling them closer to something neither of them seemed ready to face. Jungkook stepped forward again, closing the distance until they were barely a breath apart. Do you still love me? The question cut through everything. Jimin froze. His mind went blank for a second, his heart pounding so loud it drowned out the world around them. You don't get to ask me that, Jimin said, but his voice lacked conviction. Why not? Because you don't get to disappear for years and then come back demanding answers like that. I'm not demanding, Jungkook said, his voice dropping, softer but no less intense. I'm asking. It feels the same. Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. Then answer me anyway. Jimin shook his head, taking a step back this time, creating space where there had been none. No. No. Jungkook repeated. No, Jimin said again, more firmly this time. I'm not doing this. Why? Because it doesn't change anything, Jimin's voice cracked, frustration bleeding into something deeper. I told you I'm not alone anymore. Jungkook's jaw tightened. So what? That means whatever we had just disappears. That's not what I said. Then what are you saying? Jimin hesitated. That hesitation said more than enough. Jungkook let out a slow breath, running a hand over his face. You can't even say it. Say what? That you don't love me anymore. Jimin's heart stuttered. Because you can't, Jungkook continued, his voice quieter now but sharper. Because if you could, you would have said it already. Jimin looked away, his silence louder than any confession. Jungkook let out a soft, humorless laugh. Yeah, that's what I thought. Stop, Jimin muttered. Stop what? Stop acting like you have everything figured out. I don't have everything figured out, Jungkook snapped, frustration breaking through again. I just know what I feel. And what is that? Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. I'm still in love with you. The words hit harder than anything else. Jimin's breath caught, his chest tightening painfully. You don't get to say that now, Jimin whispered, but there was no strength behind it. I do, Jungkook said firmly, because it's true. Jimin shook his head, his thoughts spiraling. You're just saying that because you saw me again, because of the memories, because... No, Jungkook cut him off. I've felt this the entire time. That's not fair. Neither is pretending it's not real. Jimin let out a shaky breath, his composure cracking piece by piece. You think this is easy for me? You think I haven't spent years trying to move on, trying to convince myself that what we had was just something temporary. Jungkook's expression softened but his voice remained steady. And did it work? Jimin didn't answer. Because it hadn't. Not completely. Jungkook took a step closer again, slower this time, more careful. Whoever you're with now, do you love them? Jimin's heart clenched. That's not your business. It is if you're using them to avoid answering me. I'm not using anyone. Then answer the question. Jimin's hands trembled at his sides. I care about them. That's not what I asked. I know. Then answer me. I don't know, Jimin finally snapped, his voice breaking completely now. I don't know, okay. The confession hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Jungkook went still. Jimin's breathing was uneven, his eyes glassy with emotion he was no longer able to hide. I thought I did, I thought I could, but then you showed up and… He cut himself off, shaking his head like he was trying to push the words back. And what? Jungkook pressed, his voice softer now. Jimin looked at him, really looked at him, and whatever he saw there made something inside him finally give way. And everything got complicated again, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook exhaled slowly, like he had been waiting for that. Then maybe it was never simple to begin with, he said. The train continued moving, steady and relentless, but inside that small space everything felt suspended, caught between what was and what could still be. Jimin let out a long breath, his shoulders finally dropping slightly, like the fight was draining out of him. This isn't fair, he said again, softer now. Jungkook nodded, I know. But it's real. Yeah, Jungkook agreed quietly, it is. And for the first time since all of this started, neither of them tried to argue that away. The train plunged into another tunnel, and this time the darkness felt suffocating, like the world itself had decided to strip everything down to just the two of them and the truth they could no longer outrun. Jimin's reflection hovered faintly in the window, fractured by speed and shadow, and for a moment he didn't recognize the person staring back. You're quiet, Jungkook said, his voice softer now, but it carried a weight that pressed against Jimin's chest. Jimin let out a slow breath, I'm thinking. That's dangerous. Jimin almost smiled, but it didn't quite make it. You're one to talk. Jungkook shifted slightly, his fingers brushing against the metal pole, restless. What are you thinking about? Jimin hesitated, then laughed under his breath, something bitter laced into it. How unfair this all is. Jungkook didn't respond immediately. Jimin turned to him, his gaze sharper now. Do you know what you've done? Jungkook frowned. What I've done? You walked back into my life like nothing changed, Jimin said, his voice rising again, the tension building back up like a storm that had only briefly paused. Like you had the right to just reopen everything. I didn't say nothing changed. You didn't have to, Jimin shot back. You brought a playlist, Jungkook, a whole collection of memories, like you were handing me proof that we were still something. Jungkook's jaw tightened, because we are something. No, Jimin said immediately, shaking his head. That's the problem, we were something. Jungkook's eyes flashed. You don't believe that. You don't get to tell me what I believe. I don't have to, Jungkook said, stepping closer again, his voice dropping. I can see it. Jimin's breath hitched. See what? That you're still here. The words hit too close. Jimin looked away, his chest tightening. Don't do that. Do what? Make it sound simple, Jimin said, his voice cracking again. Like I can just forget everything that happened after you left. Jungkook stilled slightly, then tell me. Jimin laughed, but it wasn't humor, it was exhaustion. You really want to know? Yes. Fine, Jimin crossed his arms like he needed something to hold himself together. After you didn't come back, I waited a week. Jungkook's expression shifted instantly. A week. I kept thinking maybe you'd show up, Jimin continued, his voice quieter now, but each word carried weight. Maybe there was some explanation, maybe I just missed you somehow. Jungkook swallowed hard. Jimin. No, Jimin cut him off. You wanted honesty, you're getting it. Jungkook fell silent. Jimin exhaled shakily. After that week I stopped waiting, or at least I tried to. The train roared through the tunnel, the sound filling the space like a heartbeat gone wrong. I told myself you didn't care, Jimin said, that whatever we had didn't mean the same thing to you. That's not true, Jungkook said immediately, his voice tight. I know that now, Jimin replied, his gaze flickering back to him. But back then, that's what I had to believe to survive it. The word survive hit harder than anything else. Jungkook looked like it physically hurt to hear it. Jimin continued anyway, and then I met someone. Jungkook's shoulders tensed again, but he didn't interrupt this time. It wasn't dramatic, Jimin said almost distantly. No sparks, no instant connection, just quiet, stable. Jungkook's voice came out strained, and that was enough. At the time, yeah, Jimin said, because I was tired of feeling like I was standing on the edge of something that could disappear at any second. Jungkook looked down, his jaw clenched. So you chose safe. Jimin frowned slightly. I chose something that wouldn't break me. That's the same thing. Jimin shook his head. No, it's not. Then what is it? Jungkook looked up again, frustration creeping back into his voice. Because it sounds like you settled. Jimin's eyes flashed, careful. Am I wrong? Jungkook pressed, stepping closer again. You just told me there were no sparks. That doesn't mean it's not real. But is it enough? Jungkook challenged. Is it enough for you? Jimin opened his mouth then stopped. That hesitation said everything. Jungkook let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, that's what I thought. Stop acting like you have the right to judge me, Jimin snapped. You weren't there. I wanted to be. But you were, Jimin's voice broke again, louder, sharper. That's the point, Jungkook, you weren't there when I needed you. The words echoed, heavy and unforgiving. Jungkook flinched slightly, the impact clear. I know, he said quietly. Jimin's chest rose and fell rapidly, his emotions spiraling again. You don't get to come back now and question the choices I made to fix what you broke. I didn't break it alone, Jungkook said, his voice firm but not harsh. Jimin froze. What? He asked, quieter now. Jungkook met his gaze, unflinching. We both did. Jimin shook his head slowly. No. Yes, Jungkook insisted, we both let it fall apart. I waited for you, Jimin said again, like that one truth should override everything else. And I came back, Jungkook replied. The contradiction hung between them. Still unresolved even after everything they had uncovered. Jimin ran a hand over his face, frustration bleeding into something deeper. Then why does it still feel like you left? Jungkook didn't answer right away. Because there wasn't a simple answer to that. Instead, he stepped closer again, slower this time, his voice softer, because we never got to finish it. Jimin's breath caught slightly. Finish what? He asked. Us, Jungkook said. The word lingered, heavy and fragile. Jimin looked away again, his thoughts racing. Maybe some things aren't meant to be finished. Or maybe we just gave up too soon. Jimin laughed softly, shaking his head. You think this is that simple, that we just pick it up where we left off? No, Jungkook said immediately, I think we start over. Jimin looked at him again, something conflicted flickering in his eyes. And what about the person I'm with? Jungkook hesitated, but only for a second. That's your choice, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have, Jungkook replied. I'm not going to tell you to hurt someone else just because I showed up again. Jimin blinked, caught off guard by that. Jungkook continued, his voice steady but softer now, but don't stay with them out of fear either. Jimin's chest tightened. Because if you're only there because it's safe, Jungkook added, then you're lying to both of you. The words hit hard. Too hard. Jimin looked away again, his mind spinning, his heart pulling him in directions he wasn't ready to confront. You make everything sound so clear, Jimin muttered. It's not clear, Jungkook said, it's just honest. The train finally burst out of the tunnel, light flooding back in, blinding for a moment. Jimin blinked against it, his reflection disappearing as the real world came back into view. For a second, everything felt too bright. Too real. You don't even know who I am anymore, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook shook his head, then let me. Jimin let out a soft, almost defeated laugh. You think it's that easy? No, Jungkook said again, but I think it's worth trying. Jimin's heart twisted painfully at that. Because that had always been the problem. It was worth trying. It had always been worth trying. And yet, they hadn't. The train began to slow again, the next station approaching, but this time neither of them looked away from each other. The world outside kept moving. But inside that moment, everything stood still, balanced on the edge of a decision neither of them could avoid much longer. The train slowed with a long metallic sigh, brakes screaming softly against steel, as if even the machine itself felt the strain of what was happening inside it. Jimin's phone vibrated. The sound was small, almost insignificant, but in that moment it was louder than anything else. Jungkook noticed immediately. "Are you going to check that?" he asked, his voice calm but his eyes sharp. Jimin stared at his pocket like it had betrayed him. The vibration came again. Longer this time. More insistent. Jimin exhaled slowly, pulling the phone out, his fingers hesitating just for a second before the screen lit up. Jungkook didn't need to see the name. The way Jimin's expression changed was enough. "That's them," Jungkook said quietly. Jimin didn't answer. He just stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the accept button. "Answer it," Jungkook added, his tone unreadable now. Jimin glanced up. "You want me to?" "I'm not asking for me." Another vibration. Jimin swallowed, then finally pressed the button and lifted the phone to his ear. "Hey." His voice was softer now, different. Jungkook hated how different it sounded. There was a pause. Jimin turned slightly away, but not enough to hide anything completely. "I'm on the train," Jimin said. "Yeah, it's running late." Another pause. Jungkook watched every shift in his expression, every flicker in his eyes. "Yeah, I'll be there soon," Jimin continued. "Don't wait up if it gets too late." Something in Jungkook's chest twisted at that. "Don't wait up." He let out a quiet breath, looking away for the first time. Jimin's voice softened even more. "No, it's okay, I just ran into someone." Jungkook's jaw tightened. Another pause. Then, "No, it's nothing like that." The words hit harder than they should have. "Nothing like that." Jungkook let out a quiet, humorless laugh under his breath, shaking his head slightly. Jimin glanced at him briefly, guilt flashing across his face before he turned away again. "I'll explain later," Jimin said into the phone. "Okay." A softer tone now. Almost careful. "Yeah, you too." The call ended. Silence followed immediately, thick and suffocating. Jimin didn't turn around right away. He just stood there, phone still in his hand, shoulders slightly tense. Jungkook spoke first. "So that's what I am now." Jimin closed his eyes briefly. Don't what?" Jungkook asked, his voice quieter but edged. "Don't notice how you just erased everything in one sentence." "I didn't erase anything. You said it was nothing." Jimin turned back, frustration flaring again. "What was I supposed to say, Jungkook? Oh hey, I'm currently trapped on a train with the person who broke me years ago and suddenly everything I thought I moved on from is falling apart again." Jungkook didn't respond immediately. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, packing a step away. "You wanted me to be honest with you, not them." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" "The point," Jungkook said, stepping closer again, his voice tightening, "is that you're pretending this isn't something." Jimin let out a sharp breath. "Because I don't know what it is yet." "That didn't stop you from deciding what it was." Jimin froze. "That hit too precisely." "You're twisting it," Jimin muttered. "I'm not," Jungkook said firmly. "I'm listening." Jimin shook his head, his emotions tangling into something messy and overwhelming. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No," Jungkook replied quietly, "I'm making it real." Jimin laughed bitterly. "It's already real, that's the problem." The train jerked slightly as it came to a complete stop again. The door slid open. People moved. Time moved. But they didn't. Jungkook glanced at the open doors, then back at Jimin. "You should go." Jimin blinked. "What?" "You said you'd be there soon," Jungkook continued, his tone controlled, but there was something underneath it, something strained. "They're waiting." Jimin didn't move. "And you?" Jungkook let out a quiet breath, a faint smile tugging at his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm used to it." The words landed heavier than anything else. Jimin stepped closer, his voice softer now. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make it sound like it doesn't matter." Jungkook looked at him, really looked at him, and for a second the composure cracked. "It matters too much," he admitted. Jimin's chest tightened. Then why are you telling me to leave? Because I don't want to be the reason you hurt someone else, Jungkook said, not again. Jimin frowned, you weren't the reason. I was part of it, Jungkook replied, and that's enough. Jimin shook his head, frustration and emotion clashing inside him. You don't get to decide that for me. I'm not deciding, Jungkook said, I'm stepping back. That's the same thing. No, it's not, Jungkook countered, his voice sharper now. Deciding would be me telling you to stay. This, he gestured slightly between them, this is me letting you choose. Jimin stared at him, his heart pounding, his thoughts spinning. I hate this, Jimin muttered. Jungkook let out a soft, tired laugh. Yeah, me too. The announcement for the station echoed faintly through the train. Door still open. Time still ticking. Jimin glanced toward the exit. Then back at Jungkook. Then back again. You're really not going to stop me? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook's expression softened, but there was a quiet resolve in his eyes now. No. Jimin's chest ached at that. Why? He whispered. Jungkook held his gaze. Because if you stay, he said slowly, I need to know it's because you want to, not because I asked. The honesty in that hurt more than anything else. Jimin swallowed hard, his throat tight. You always do this, he said, but his voice lacked the earlier anger. Do what? Make me choose. Jungkook shook his head slightly. Life does that, I'm just not getting in the way this time. The doors began to beep. A warning. Closing soon. Jimin's pulse quickened. His feet felt rooted to the floor, like moving in any direction would break something permanently. Jungkook, he started, but the words didn't come. Jungkook didn't interrupt. He just watched. Waited. For once, not chasing, not pulling, not holding on too tightly. Just waiting. The doors began to slide shut. Jimin took a step. But not toward the exit. Toward Jungkook. The doors closed completely behind him. The train started moving again. And this time, Jimin didn't look back. The moment the train pulled away from the station, something shifted irreversibly in the air between them. Jungkook didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared at Jimin like he was trying to understand what had just happened, like he was afraid if he blinked, Jimin would disappear again. You didn't leave, Jungkook said finally, his voice low, almost disbelieving. Jimin let out a shaky breath, his chest rising and falling unevenly. No. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was thick, charged, alive with everything they hadn't processed yet. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, letting out a quiet, almost breathless laugh. You didn't leave. Stop repeating it, Jimin muttered, though there was no real bite in his voice. I get it. I don't think you do, Jungkook replied, stepping closer. Do you even realize what you just did? Jimin looked at him, something flickering in his eyes, fear, maybe, or the weight of the decision finally settling in. Yeah, I do. Then say it. Jimin hesitated. Why? Because I need to hear you say it. Jimin exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping for a moment before lifting again. I chose to stay. The words hit harder than anything else so far. Jungkook's breath caught, his expression shifting in a way Jimin hadn't seen in years, raw, unguarded, almost fragile. Say it again, Jungkook whispered. Jimin frowned slightly. You're pushing it. Say it again. Jimin stared at him, then shook his head with a faint, disbelieving smile. I chose to stay. Jungkook closed his eyes briefly, like he needed a second to absorb it. When he opened them again, something had changed. Not the tension. Not the history. But something underneath it all. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. You just walked away from them, Jungkook said, quieter now. Jimin's expression faltered slightly. I didn't walk away. Jungkook tilted his head. You didn't get off the train. That's not the same thing. It feels like it is. Jimin ran a hand over his face, frustration creeping back in. Can you not make this more dramatic than it already is? I'm not making it dramatic, Jungkook said. I'm trying to understand what this means. Jimin let out a long breath. It means I need time. Jungkook's jaw tightened slightly. Time for what? To think, Jimin said, his voice steady but heavy. To figure out what I'm doing. With them, Jungkook asked. With everything. Jungkook nodded slowly, but there was tension in the movement. including me. Jimin met his gaze, yes, including you. The honesty in that didn't soften anything, it made it sharper. Jungkook took a step closer again, his voice dropping. Do I at least matter in that decision? Jimin let out a soft, almost exhausted laugh. You're the reason there's even a decision to make. Jungkook's chest tightened at that. Then don't treat me like I'm just part of the confusion, he said. I need to know where I stand. Jimin shook his head. That's exactly what I can't give you right now. Why not? Because I don't trust myself yet, Jimin admitted, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable than before. Everything I thought I had figured out just fell apart in one train ride. Jungkook watched him carefully. So you're afraid? Jimin didn't deny it. Yeah. Of what? Jimin hesitated, then let the truth come out anyway. Of making the same mistake twice. Jungkook's expression shifted. Loving me was a mistake. Jimin immediately shook his head. No, losing myself and it was. The words landed hard. Jungkook stepped back slightly this time, like he needed space to process that. I never asked you to lose yourself, he said. I know, Jimin replied, but it still happened. The train sped forward, the city lights streaking past again, but this time the motion felt less like escape and more like being pulled deeper into something inevitable. Jungkook leaned against the pole, his gaze dropping for a moment before lifting again. So what now? Jimin exhaled slowly. Now I go home. The answer was simple. Too simple. Jungkook frowned. And then what? And then I figure out what I'm doing with my life, Jimin said. With them, with you. Jungkook's eyes searched his face. And where does that leave me tonight? Jimin hesitated. Then quietly. On this train with me. Jungkook let out a breath, something soft flickering across his expression. That's not enough. I know. Then why does it feel like you're already pulling away again? Jimin's eyes flashed slightly. Because you're asking for answers I don't have yet. I'm asking for something real. This is real, Jimin said, his voice firm. Me staying, that was real. Jungkook nodded slowly. Then don't disappear after this. Jimin looked at him, something conflicted rising again. You think I will? I think you're capable of it, Jungkook said honestly, just like I was. Jimin flinched slightly at that. Then don't let me, Jimin said. Jungkook blinked. What? Don't let me disappear, Jimin repeated, his voice quieter now but steady. If I start pulling away again, call me out on it. Jungkook studied him for a moment. You're asking me to fight for you. I'm asking you not to give up on me the way we both did before. The words settled heavily between them. Jungkook let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing just slightly. That's not a small thing to ask. I know. And you're not even sure what you want yet. I'm not, Jimin admitted. Jungkook looked at him, really looked at him, and something in his expression softened. Okay, he said. Jimin blinked. Okay. Okay, Jungkook repeated, I won't give up. Jimin's chest tightened. But don't expect me to stand still either, Jungkook added, his voice gaining a slight edge again. I'm not going to wait forever while you figure things out. That's fair. I mean it. I know. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't suffocating. It was uncertain. Fragile. But not broken. Jimin leaned back slightly, his tension easing just a fraction. You've changed. Jungkook let out a quiet laugh. I'd hope so. No, Jimin said, shaking his head slightly. I mean, you're different. Jungkook tilted his head. Good different or bad different? Jimin considered that for a moment. Then softly. Scary different. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. Scary. You don't run anymore, Jimin said. You stay, you push, you say things you never used to say. Jungkook's expression softened slightly. You make it sound like a bad thing. It's not, Jimin admitted, it's just new. Jungkook nodded. I had a lot of time to think. Jimin let out a small, quiet laugh, clearly. The train began to slow again, the final stretch approaching. Jimin glanced toward the window, his reflection clearer now, less distorted. Next stop is mine, he said. Jungkook's chest tightened slightly. Of course it is. Jimin looked back at him. You don't have to get off. I know. A pause. Then Jungkook added quieter. But I think I will. Jimin blinked. Why? Jungkook met his gaze, something steady and undeniable in his eyes. Because this time, he said, I'm not letting you walk away alone. The train slowed further. The station lights came into view. And for the first time since this all began, the future didn't feel like something distant. It felt immediate, unavoidable. And waiting just beyond the doors, the train doors slid open, and the rush of outside air hit them like a sudden reality check, cool, sharp, and unforgiving. Jimin stepped out first. Jungkook followed. The platform was crowded, voices overlapping, footsteps echoing, announcements blurring into noise, but somehow everything felt distant, like the world had dimmed itself just enough to let this moment take center stage. Jimin stopped walking. Jungkook almost ran into him. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Jimin turned around. You don't have to do this, he said, his voice quieter now but still carrying that edge of tension. Jungkook tilted his head slightly. Do what? Follow me out here like it means something, Jimin replied. You already said your part on the train. Jungkook's gaze didn't waver, and you think that was enough? It should be, Jimin said, for tonight. Jungkook let out a short breath, glancing around before stepping closer again, lowering his voice. You really think we can just pause this? Jimin crossed his arms, his defenses creeping back in now that they were no longer trapped in that moving space. We have to. Why? Because this, Jimin gestured between them, isn't something you rush. Jungkook nodded slowly. But his eyes remained sharp, and going back to them is. Jimin's jaw tightened. Don't start. I'm not starting, Jungkook said, I'm asking. You're pushing. Because you're avoiding. Jimin let out a frustrated breath, turning away for a second before facing him again. You think I don't see what you're doing? Jungkook raised an eyebrow. Enlighten me. You're trying to corner me, Jimin said, his voice rising slightly. You want me to make a decision right now here so you don't have to sit with the uncertainty. Jungkook didn't deny it immediately. That silence was answer enough. Jimin shook his head. That's not fair. Neither is going home to someone else while telling me you need time, Jungkook shot back, his voice tightening again. Jimin stepped closer, his eyes flashing. You don't get to throw that at me like I'm doing something wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong, Jungkook said, I'm saying it hurts. The honesty in that cut through the tension in a different way. Jimin's expression faltered just slightly. I didn't ask you to feel anything, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook laughed, but it came out strained. That's not how this works and you know it. A group of people brushed past them, breaking the moment for a second, but neither of them moved. Jimin's voice softened, but only just. Then what do you want from me? Jungkook held his gaze. I want to know if I'm about to lose you again. Jimin's chest tightened. You don't even have me right now, he said. That's exactly the problem. Silence stretched between them again, thick and complicated. Jimin looked away, his thoughts racing, his heart pulling him in directions he wasn't ready to face. I can't give you an answer tonight, he said finally. Jungkook nodded slowly. Then don't. Jimin blinked, surprised. What? Don't give me an answer tonight, Jungkook repeated, his voice calmer now, but there was still tension beneath it. But don't walk away like this is nothing either. Jimin frowned slightly. I'm not doing that. You're about to, Jungkook said. You're about to go home, act like everything's normal, and then what? Think about me in silence until you decide whether I fit back into your life. Jimin didn't respond. Because that was exactly what he had planned. Jungkook let out a quiet breath, shaking his head. I'm not doing that again. Then what are you doing? Jimin asked. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice lowering, more controlled now but no less intense. I'm staying in this with you. Jimin's heart skipped. That's not something you get to decide alone. I know, Jungkook said, but I can decide not to disappear this time. Jimin swallowed hard, his composure cracking slightly under the weight of it all. You think that makes this easier? Jimin asked. No, Jungkook said, I think it makes it real. Jimin let out a shaky breath, his gaze dropping for a second before lifting again. You're asking me to blow up my life. I'm asking you to be honest about it, Jungkook replied. That's the same thing. It's not, Jungkook insisted. Your life isn't something fragile that breaks the second you tell the truth. You don't know that? Jimin shot back, his voice rising again. You weren't there when I had to rebuild it from nothing. Jungkook flinched, the words hitting hard. I know, he said quietly. Jimin's chest rose and fell unevenly, his emotions spilling over now. You weren't there when I had to learn how to breathe without you, when I had to convince myself that I didn't need you. Jungkook took a slow step closer, his voice softer now. And did it work? Jimin looked at him, his eyes shining with something dangerously close to tears. I thought it did. Jungkook's expression softened, but there was pain in it too, and now. Jimin didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was obvious. Jungkook stepped even closer, his voice barely above a whisper now. Now you're standing here with me instead of going home. Jimin's breath hitched. Say it, Jungkook murmured. Jimin shook his head weakly. You really need to stop doing that. Say it. Jimin hesitated, his defenses crumbling piece by piece. Now I don't know anything anymore, he admitted. The words felt like a collapse. Jungkook exhaled slowly, like he had been waiting for that. Good, he said quietly. Jimin frowned, confused. Good. Yeah, Jungkook said, a faint, almost sad smile tugging at his lips. Because at least now you're not lying to yourself. Jimin stared at him, something shifting again in his chest, something uncomfortable but real. You're different, Jimin said again, softer this time. Jungkook shrugged slightly. So are you. Jimin let out a small, tired laugh. Yeah, I guess I am. Another silence settled between them, but this one felt less like a battle and more like standing on the edge of something unknown. Jimin glanced toward the station exit. Then back at Jungkook. I should go, he said, but there was hesitation in his voice now. Jungkook nodded, I know. But neither of them moved. Jimin exhaled slowly. This is a bad idea. Probably. And it's going to hurt someone. Most likely. Jimin let out another breath, his voice quieter now, including us. Jungkook held his gaze. Yeah. A pause. Then. So why does it still feel like I can't walk away? Jimin asked. Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. Because you never really did. The answer settled deep. Jimin looked at him for a long moment, his heart pounding, his thoughts finally colliding into something undeniable. This doesn't end cleanly, does it? Jimin said. Jungkook shook his head slightly. No. Jimin let out a soft, almost defeated laugh. Then don't disappear, he said quietly. Jungkook's expression shifted, something resolute settling in his eyes. I won't. Jimin nodded once, like that was the only answer he needed right now. Then slowly, he turned and started walking toward the exit. This time Jungkook didn't follow immediately. He watched. Waited. And just before Jimin disappeared into the crowd, Jungkook called out his name. Jimin stopped. Didn't turn around. This isn't over, Jungkook said. Jimin stood there for a second, his back still facing him. Then without looking back. I know, came too quietly. Jimin stood by the window of his apartment, watching the city wake up in slow, indifferent motions, cars threading through streets, people moving with purpose, a world that hadn't paused for the storm inside him. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back on that train, back in that moment where everything he thought was settled had unraveled with terrifying ease. His phone lay on the table. Unread messages. Missed calls. From someone who had been steady, patient, present. Jimin stared at the screen, his chest tightening, not from confusion this time but from clarity that hurt in a different way. He picked it up. His fingers hovered. Then he dialed. It rang once. Twice. Then. Jimin, the voice on the other end was soft, concerned. Are you okay? You didn't come home. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. I know. A pause. Did something happen? Jimin swallowed, forcing the words out because for once he wasn't going to hide behind silence or half-truths. Yes. Another pause, longer this time. Do you want to talk about it? Jimin exhaled slowly. I need to be honest with you. The air shifted immediately. There was no anger on the other end. Just quiet understanding, and maybe the beginning of something breaking. I think I've been trying to convince myself that what we have is enough, Jimin said, his voice steady even as his chest ached. and it's not fair to you. Silence. Then softly. Is this about someone else? Jimin didn't hesitate this time. Yes. The word landed clean. No confusion. No denial. Just truth. I see, the voice replied, quieter now but still calm. Is it someone from your past? Jimin's grip tightened slightly around the phone. Yes. Another pause. And in that pause, Jimin realized something important. This wasn't explosive, dramatic, or chaotic. It was just real. And sometimes, reality hurt more than anything else. Do you love them? Came the next question. Jimin's breath caught. But unlike before, this time he answered. Yes. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of acceptance. And sadness. Then you already know what you have to do, the voice said gently. Jimin felt something in his chest crack, but not in the same way as before. This wasn't confusion breaking. It was certainty. I'm sorry, Jimin whispered. I know, came the reply. Take care of yourself, Jimin. The call ended. Jimin lowered the phone slowly, his hand trembling slightly, but his mind clearer than it had been in years. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it was honest. And for the first time, that felt like enough. By evening, the city was alive again, lights flickering on, shadows stretching long across the streets. Jungkook stood outside the station. Same place. Same entrance. But everything felt different now. He hadn't expected Jimin to come. Not really. Hope was dangerous like that, it lingered even when logic told you to let it go. He checked his phone again. Nothing. A quiet sigh left his lips as he shoved his hands into his pockets, glancing at the passing crowd. Maybe this was it. Maybe some stories didn't get the ending you wanted. Maybe. Jungkook. He froze. That voice. He turned. And there he was. Jimin. Standing a few steps away, slightly out of breath, like he had run, like he had made a choice and didn't want to lose the courage before he got here. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jungkook let out a quiet breath, something unreadable crossing his face. You came. Jimin nodded once. I said I wouldn't disappear. Jungkook studied him carefully, and Jimin stepped closer, his gaze steady now, no hesitation left. And I meant it. The distance between them closed, not rushed, not desperate, just certain. Jungkook's voice was quieter now. What happened? Jimin didn't look away. I ended it. Jungkook's breath caught. Jimin. I didn't do it for you, Jimin said immediately, firm but not harsh. I did it because it wasn't right, because I knew I was holding onto something safe instead of something real. Jungkook nodded slowly, taking that in. And us. Jimin exhaled softly. We're not safe. A faint, almost disbelieving smile touched Jungkook's lips. No, we're not. But we're real, Jimin added. That hit deeper. Jungkook looked at him, really looked at him like he was trying to memorize this version, the one who stayed, who chose, who didn't run. And that's enough, Jungkook asked. Jimin hesitated for just a second. Then, it's everything. The city moved around them, loud and alive, but in that moment it felt distant again, like the world had stepped back just enough to let them breathe. Jungkook stepped closer. Not hesitant. Not afraid. Just certain. This doesn't fix everything, he said. I know. We still have a lot to figure out. I know. It's going to be messy. Jimin let out a small, soft laugh. It always was. Jungkook smiled faintly at that. Then his expression softened, something deeper settling in his eyes. But this time, he said, I'm not leaving. Jimin held his gaze, his heart steady in a way it hadn't been before. Then don't. A pause. Not empty. Not uncertain. Just full. Jungkook reached out slowly, like he was giving Jimin time to pull away if he wanted to. Jimin didn't. Their fingers brushed. Then intertwined. Simple. But it meant everything. The city lights reflected in their eyes, the noise of the world fading into something softer, something distant. And for the first time in a long time, they weren't chasing the past. They weren't running from it either. They were standing right there in the present, choosing each other not because it was easy, not because it was safe. but because it was real. In this time, they stayed.